There we go. All right, everything's ready to roll now. Thanks for tonight. Okay. Okay, I think we are all set. A little more technically adept than we were last night. We'll let some people get online. Streaming to multiple platforms this evening. I'm on YouTube. I'm on Twitch. And I just did something to my chair. That was nice. That was fun. YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Instagram, and a few other places. So pretty much anywhere you can find streaming. Anyway, okay, we've got people watching now, so here we go. My name is Brian Schott. I am the managing editor and publisher of UtahPoliticalWatch.news. I've been a political journalist here in Utah for more than 25 years, and let's start talking about some of the important stories that you probably need to know about in Utah politics. Last night we talked about redistricting, and we got the first notice that the redistricting committee of the legislature, they're getting underway on Monday. Their first meeting is Monday at 9 a.m. And don't worry, I will recap that for you on Monday afternoon, evening after it is done. If you have a question or a comment, go ahead and leave it in the chat. I've got Instagram chat up. I've got Twitch. I've got all the other places that I'm streaming to. So if you have a question or a comment, something you'd like to ask about what's happening in Utah politics, please just leave it in the chat and I will try to get to it. So thank you so much for joining us this evening. But we do have the redistricting committee of the legislature. Their first meeting is on Monday at 9 a.m. up at the Capitol, and 10 members of that committee. There were 20 the last time they did this, but they had to draw 4 maps. So now there are just 10. And as I said last night, 8 Republicans, 2 Democrats on the committee. 5 of the people decided to, or 5 of the people who were on the redistricting last time are part of it this time as well. So the chairs are Scott Sandell, who was the Senate chair last time, and the House chair is Representative Candace Perucci, both Republicans. They have to they spend the next week drawing maps. Their map will come out on the 25th. So that is a Thursday, I believe, is when they have to publish that map and submit it to the court on Friday the 26th. And then the public comment period starts. So that's going to be dominating the Utah political landscape for the next 50 some odd days. The ultimate deadline is whatever happens, we have to have whatever map we're going to use in 2026 in place by November 10th. That is the drop dead date that the legislature, that the court set to start that again. November 10th is the drop dead date that the Lieutenant Governor's office, who schedules and handles the statewide part of the election. All the elections are run by the counties, but they handle the logistics and everything. In order to get the maps in place, everything running the way it's supposed to be, that has to be in place by November 10th. So that's the timeline, and everything gets underway on Monday. Public comment on the maps happens after they are published. Again, if you have a question, if you have a comment, if something you'd like to ask about what's happening in the Utah political landscape on this Friday evening, please leave it in the chat. Love to hear from you. All right, I'm going to talk about a story that I wrote a while ago. And this story's been sort of bubbling up in the Utah political landscape for a little while. So let me go back and recap before I get to the new reporting that I did. Utah Senate President Stuart Adams, and hopefully you've seen this story. If not, here's the brief TLDR. In 2023, his step-granddaughter, and it's important to note step-granddaughter, was arrested and charged with child rape. She was 18 years old. The victim was 13. And in Utah, 13-year-olds cannot consent to sex. And according to charging documents, and I've read all the documents in this case, they spent months together after the granddaughter met this victim who was male. Not that it matters, but just so you understand the dynamics here. The step-granddaughter and the victim met through some mutual friends, and they spent, according to the charging documents, months hanging out, making out, flirting, and then eventually it led to sex twice. And again, 13-year-olds cannot legally consent in Utah. So, that was in 2023. As the case is going on, the 2024 legislature starts. And Adams, who is one of the top elected officials in the state, approaches Republican Senator Kurt Cullimore and talks to him about the case, talks to him about the situation involving his step-granddaughter. And Cullimore was already going to be running under the age of 14. Prosecutors can treat them like a child, treat them like a juvenile rather than an adult if they are still in high school. And I didn't say this before, but Adams' step-granddaughter was charged with 4 first-degree felonies, 2 for child rape and 2 for forcible sodomy on a child. And what this change of the law would do is made it so that someone who is 18 years old and has sexual relations, has sex with a 13-year-old, and I know I'm not using the correct terminology, but it's very hard to talk about this in the correct terms, but just so you're getting a sense of what's happening, a 13-year-old cannot consent to sex, okay? And so what this change to the law would do is that it would allow prosecutors to treat the 18-year-old like a juvenile, charge them as a juvenile in certain circumstances as long as there was no coercion involved, and allow them to get a lower charge. Instead of a first-degree felony, it would be a third-degree felony. Okay? So this law passes. Adams doesn't mention anything publicly about his granddaughter. He doesn't lobby for this. He doesn't say anything about it publicly. We don't know if he said anything in the caucus because the Senate caucuses for Republicans are closed. So we don't know. And we'll probably never know. Nobody's allowed in who's not a member of the Senate or Senate staff. So, this law passes. After it goes into effect, Adam's step-granddaughter gets a plea deal. Prosecutors, instead of charging her with 4 first-degree felonies, she pleads guilty to a second-degree felony and 3 misdemeanors. And that means no more jail time. Then she served a week in jail and then was on house arrest for over 500 days. So there would be no extra jail time, and she would not have to register as a sex offender. Now, the law was not retroactive, okay? This change of the law was not retroactive, so it wouldn't have applied. But the prosecutor, the defense, and the judge all said that this change to the law was a primary reason why they decided to give a plea deal to Adam's granddaughter. Okay? So even though the law was not retroactive, this was the reason why. And this was all first reported by the Salt Lake Tribune. So credit where credit is due. And Adams said that he did not use any undue influence when he pushed this law through. He didn't mean for it to impact his granddaughter's case, his step-granddaughter's case, but it did. Okay? It did do that. And Adams has been under fire ever since. People have called for him to resign. It's not a good look. It's really not for politicians in the state. And then his step-granddaughter benefits from it. Anyway, so that's where we were at. I've continued to made private. Probably everybody assumed that they were Adams' official letterhead. It wasn't. He didn't use his title. But there were some things in this letter. I'm going to share my screen here real quick. This is the story that I wrote, and you can read the whole thing at utahpoliticalwatch.news. I'm going to bring up the letter in a second. I've redacted that the victim's mother was not happy with the fact that there was a plea deal. They spent several months together before this became a sexual relationship. And, obviously there's a power dynamic there. She was 18. And the letter, it seems a little bit problematic because what Adams and his wife attempted to do, trying to make the victim feel included. I'm going to bring up the letter now, so you'll be able to see it here. Now, things are redacted. But here in the third paragraph, it says, she's the oldest in her family and has pioneered their transition to Utah. Our hope was that she would find good friends because she's such a thoughtful and considerate girl. A member of her family has Down syndrome and lives with them. She is so very concerned about helping those who struggle, or at least characterize, found friends, and those friends introduced her to the victim. Because she is so concerned about others, we can understand the unfortunate that encounter results. That's weird. That's weird phrasing. At least it struck me as weird. And I talked to a few people. We understand that she would reach out to a younger sibling of some of her friends to make sure he felt included. It's extremely unfortunate the encounter resulted in an intimate relationship. That's a little strange. Adams did not comment. He didn't want to comment about it. He rarely know that I am suing the Utah legislature because they refused to give me a press pass. We can get into that in a second. Letter goes on for a few paragraphs talking about all the indignities that his granddaughter suffered because of this. She was arrested at school under house arrest. And into the last paragraph, again, some weird phrasing. In the 10 years we've known granddaughter, she's been around children from ages 2 to 20. She appears normal in every way. We have not heard of or observed any abnormal behavior. Filed by her father and her stepmother, who happens to be Adam's daughter. But overall, this feels like a very, very strange way to characterize this as an attempt to make the victim feel included, and then somehow it turned into an intimate relationship, forcible sodomy on a child. And then Adams gets the law changed, and then everybody points to that law change as the reason why they gave. Adams has faced a couple of calls to resign, mostly from Democrats, and he just brushes those off. Most powerful Republican politicians, and again, refuse to go on the record because of for fear that there would be retaliation. Colleagues in the legislature are more afraid of their voters than they are of Adams. And that's where we stand right now. I mean, Adams is incredibly influential and gives to candidates whom he deems worthy. And if you cross him as a Republican, you're probably not going to get any of that funding. That's just the way that this works. And Adams, he controls the Republican caucus in the Senate with an I mean, it was actually when I filed a request asking for the letter, asking to access the letter, supposed to be private, this one. And yes, it is common for people to write these letters of support. I just thought it was interesting because when I read it, the incident was strange. And I think it is legitimate to ask some questions of this. Anyway, you can read the whole story at utahpoliticalwatch.news. Angela on Instagram says, most often I see bishops write these letters and nothing new. Yes, it is common, and I've spoken to some lawyers about that. But I do think it sort of helps flesh out the whole story of this, or flesh out more information about this story. And they are public figures, and mostly I wanted to see if he was improperly using his office to influence this case. And you could argue that he may have, simply by getting this change to the law passed, even though he points to the fact that the change to the law says that the person can be charged with a third-degree felony, and his granddaughter got a plea deal for a second-degree felony. And that's all true. Defense all pointed to take into account the legislative intent. And that's why they offered the plea deal rather than push forward with interesting. So it's Friday. I won't keep you too much longer. Appreciate you chiming in or shooting last week of Charlie Kirk at Utah Valley University, and we are seeing some of the aftermath of that. It's down to work and works on their maps for Congress. And as we spoke to them on Monday evening, we'll talk about what the legislature has said. I do want to point this out, though, on these maps, because it is clear that the Republican majority in the legislature, they're still upset that the judge ruled against them, Redistricting Commission. One of the things they said is it only passed with a bare majority. It was just over 50 to repeat. But that's also how elections work. If you get 50% plus one, then you win. And that's what happened. So they used to justify, I heard them say that, it didn't pass in this county, it only passed in 4 counties. Well, the counties where it passes where all the people are, right? You know, when they draw these new maps, they're going to have to split it. They don't need to split it 4 times, but they're going to have to split it. Anyway, I won't get into that. It's Friday night. This thing rolling. Do a habit where we get together every evening and chat about politics. I don't know if I'll do anything on Saturday or Sunday. I might. I'll try to send out some notice, or if something happens that we need to chat about. In the meantime, if there's something you would like me to talk about, you can send me an email. You'll find that on my website, on all of my socials. You can leave me a DM or a comment on my socials, and I would love to answer your questions. What do you want to know about Utah politics? What is it that you would like to know about? What are some of the things that you're not quite understanding about the process? It doesn't have to be what happened in the news. If this new district is more Democrat friendly. You know, I think that that's something that we can discuss. So please send me your questions, send me your comments. We're just getting started, so thank you so much. Please follow me on all the socials. Go to my newsletter or go to my website, utahpoliticalwatch.news. You can see the address right there. I'm completely funded by my readers. That's who makes it possible. They're the reason why I get up in the morning. So hopefully we'll see you again. Hope you guys have a great weekend. We will redistricting committee. That's going to happen on Monday morning at 9 a.m. And I'll run that down, recap it for you right here on Monday. So again, have a great weekend. Thanks for watching. Bye.